Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyekolu. Now, in Ethiopia, fears are growing of civilian casualties and a refugee crisis as the government enters what it calls its final phase in its actions against rebels in the northern region of Tigray. Eyewitnesses say government troops have entered two major towns in the area, with some saying civilians have been targeted, something the government denies, saying that its airstrikes on Tigrayan towns had been precision-guided attacks on armed stockpiles and what it called hideouts of the Tigrayan junta. The leadership in Tigray has called on everyone to fight back. Tens of thousands of people have fled to neighboring Sudan. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's army chief has accused the head of the World Health Organization of supporting insurgent forces in Tigray with weapons. Phone and internet connections with the region have been suspended, so it's very difficult to establish what's happening, but we're going to try. And the man to help us with it, with his analysis of the Ethiopia conflict, the African defense expert and international security analyst, David Otto. David, thank you very much indeed for joining us. In a moment, I'd like to tap your brain to know what you know about this roping in of the World Health Organization head into the conflict. But just first of all, bring us up to date on the latest with the fighting in as much as you know.
Thank you, Charles. The current war, I call it, which is ongoing between the Ethiopian Defense Forces and the Tigrayan Peoples Liberation Force is on day 15 since the 4th of November that the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed declared war on the Tigrayan region, which is of course north neighboring Eritrea. Now, what has been happening is that the Tigrayan Peoples Liberation Forces are saying that they are repelling attacks from the Ethiopian Defense Forces out of the region and within the region. But the Ethiopian Defense Forces under the Prime Minister is saying, they are targeting, military stockpiles and areas where the Tigrayan People's Liberation Forces have been located. But the difficulty, as you mentioned, is that internet has been blocked. The transportation it's made inaccessible either by land or by air. And there is no electricity. So information is very difficult to access from this area. But somehow the situation is getting worse. And as you mentioned, it's getting to a point where accusing fingers are being pointed. Charles, Ethiopia is a very politically, deeply regional and ethnic system of governance which they operate over there. And I'm sure that this is one of the areas that you're going to talk about when you speak about the head of the WHO.
Yes, and you took me right to it. I was going to ask you, what are we to make of that extraordinary story that's broken, that Ethiopia's army chief is accusing the head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, who is of Tigrayan descent, of supporting and trying to procure arms and diplomatic support for the TPLF?
It's a very dangerous narrative, and it's not surprising because anyone that you speak to within Ethiopia would tell you what they believe, depending on what ethnic group they come from. Remember that the Tigrayan, they've been in power for the past 3 decades before, Abiy Ahmed took over from then in 2018. And, of course, they wielded a lot of power. The current WHO, managing director or whatever you want to call it, again, as you said, he's from the Tigray region. He's a member of the TPLF, which is the Tigray Peoples Liberation Force Executive Council. He used to be the Ethiopian health minister at the time when the Tigrayan were in power in 2005 to 2012. And he was the foreign minister up until 2016 for 6 years. So it's not surprising that the Ethiopians who come from different regions, especially the Oromia and the Amhara, they are pointing fingers on him because, of course, him being somebody from the Tigrayan region. I mean, to be honest with you, Charles, what they're trying to do is to clip his wings, as somebody who has a wide international connection. So I think the best way to do that is to perhaps accuse him very early before he does anything, of that nature. Perhaps I think that's the kind of the predictive plan here.
And just getting to tap your considerable experience when it comes to defense and security issues in the Horn of Africa. I mean, looking at the TPLF, who are saying that they're going to fight to the last person, and the Ethiopian Defense Forces, who appear to, that's the federal government, who appear to have like planes and, jet fighters and all of that. I mean, how do you think both sides are weighted against each other militarily? And do you see this lasting a very long time?
Oh, Charles, this is just the beginning of a chaotic and war of attrition to come. The TPLF is not, one of those forces that, can be taken upon very lightly by the Ethiopian Defense Forces. I mean, they have about the 250,000 force, personnel within that region. And, I'm talking about a conventional warfare here, but this is not just going to be a conventional warfare. Once the initial phase of the battle is over, perhaps it will be over soon, then it would kick in with the asymmetric phase, and that is the most deadly phase. So this is going to be a long war, in the region, considering the fact that you have very vulnerable countries, I call them, or volatile. Surrounding Ethiopia, you've got Somaliland, Somalia, Eritrea, which, of course, had its own serious crisis with Ethiopia before Abiy Ahmed negotiated for a peace settlement in which he actually won an award. But many people are asking that how come a prime minister who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, is now a war prime minister? So it's a complex scenario, and Sudan, which is a neighboring country to the northern region of Tigray, is suffering the most because of the influx of refugees that are coming into that country now. So it's going to be a long war, and Ethiopia will not just win it, very easily, Charles.
Well, that's a good point, but you did talk about the immediate conflict possibly being short. The Ethiopian Prime Minister threatening a final act of law enforcement, according to what he said, against the Tigrayan regional forces. I mean, it sounds like he's ordering the military to conduct a major final offensive against Tigray.
Again, as I said, it's a dangerous move, Charles, because the Tigrayans are not just in the Tigray region. Remember, they're spread all over Ethiopia, and because of the ethnic narratives that are being whipped up by all ethnic groups, especially the Oromia and the Amhara, which are some of the prominent ones, it's going to come to a point where you would have spontaneous attacks being launched throughout the country. You don't know where that is going to go to. So, I think the Prime Minister is mistaken to believe that the war is going to be fought specifically in the northern part, which is the Tigray region. I mean, this is just the beginning of it. The phase two of this battle, if it's not ended, immediately by some, intervention from a credible party, it's going to involve a scenario where you'd see attacks happening in Addis Ababa, just throughout the country. Remember, Ethiopia has one of the most efficient aviation industry. I mean, one would begin to worry, if you want to fly across that region, because the Tigrayan Peoples Liberation Force has the capacity to shoot down airlines. This war needs to stop because it's not looking good at all, Charles.
Well, I have to say it sounds monstrously complicated, but thanks for putting it in some perspective for us. David Otto is the African defense expert and international security analyst, and he's been keeping a weather eye on developments out of northern Ethiopia and the surrounding Horn of Africa. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.